How many countries are in the world? Have you ever thought about that? Let's take a guess. You guessed it right, 193 countries based on the United Nation members. The question, though, is how many of them really matter? In other words, how do we define countries in terms of their power in the geopolitical chessboard? Now, the question is different. So, you might think that all countries are equal. But the reality of the world is that countries are not equal in terms of their geopolitical power. As a matter of fact, if you start thinking about the geopolitical power, those countries who can shape our international system, can dictate terms, can really make a difference in the world, the number shrinks significantly from 193. Maybe we come back to a dozen. So the question for you and whoever is interested in internationalist and geopolitics is how do we understand countries that matter in terms of geopolitics, right? And that is very important. The international system is not flat. It's deeply hierarchical. That means there is a jungle. Would you like to imagine a jungle? And in that jungle, whether we like it or not, their power makes a huge difference. Just like we can survive in the jungle, what are the things that makes us survive? Being powerful, being smart, having strategy, having some sort of vision. All of it matters in our survival in a jungle. That's very similar to international system. Some states can project military force across the globe. Others can defend their own borders. Some even cannot defend their borders without any outside help. So they become very dependent. Some others can set international trade terms. Others simply accept them. And some people really set the culture globally. And they can export their values to the world. And others just consume them. So these are not just being cynicist about international system. It's just being real. And that brings us to the very important concept of power. We have to understand the elements of power. Just like going back to the jungle, there's some elements that make us resilient, right? Having a healthy body, having trained before how to survive in the jungle, having the right mindset. There are several factors that you can think about that can define us being successful, being out there in the jungle, just like for countries. So we can talk about 5 elements here. One of them is obviously military power. If you want to be at the geopolitical chessboard, you have to be able to project some form of power in terms of military force. The second one is economic power, the ability to generate, accumulate, and deploy wealth. Because wealth means leverage. And the wealth also allows you to have bigger military and financial systems. And you can even, if you're like the US, you can impose even sanctions. You can do a lot of things with economic power. The other one is geopolitical power. So if you have some control over a choke point, you have access to the warm water, natural resources, oil and gas, climate, all of it gives you power. The fourth element is demographic power. And that's something people often ignore. Having a large, young, educated, and unified population is an enormous strategic asset. So you want to have young people in your country. And if you go back, for example, China's rise in the past 4 decades, it's also there's many factors, but one of them was the demographic dividend that it had, having over 1 billion people entering the modern economy over a single generation. That's huge. Demographic decline, on the other hand, is bad. You can imagine a country that is, doesn't have a whole lot of young people and with a lot of a senior population. This is on an element that can have a direct impact on a country's power. The last one is soft power. Soft power is a discussion that's very important, but the reality is soft power, the bottom line is soft power is the ability to attract rather than coerce, to shape preferences, values, and aspirations of other society. In other words, the ability to convince others based on values that they do what you like them to do without using the stick. In other words, having hegemonic overlay on their value, so they do what you like them to do, thinking that this is in their own best interest, right? Or it might be a mutual interest too. But soft power is very important, and you might get back to it later. So with that in mind, remember, yes, there are over 190 countries in the world, but there are only a handful that are at the geopolitical chessboard. The others are just followers, and they, whether we like it or not, they are going to be inconsequential in the geopolitical chessboard. Thank you, and bye bye.